At 4:44 on September 1st, 1939, on the Westerplatte Peninsula in Danzig Harbor, the dawn arrived under a heavy, overcast sky. A salty wind swept across the coal yards and damp sand of the shore. The night had just begun to recede, revealing a lead-gray sea. Dew glistened on the low-lying pines that dotted the spit of land. Polish bunkers stood silently, their entrances cleverly concealed with branches. The garrison had been awake for hours, the men now positioned in trenches that, according to some accounts, were dug to depths of 5 to 2 meters. Shoulders pressed against the cold, damp sand, they clutched their rifles, holding them as if holding their very breath. Offshore, the old battleship Schleswig-Holstein glided ominously into firing position. Shrouded in mist, it resembled a drifting block of iron. The massive 280mm main guns, with maximum range exceeding 30 kilometers, as some sources indicate, began their slow traverse. The smaller, secondary 150mm guns were adjusted downwards, ready to engage targets at closer range. Inside the turrets, an eerie silence reigned, broken only by the sharp snap of a target buzzer. The coast erupted. The battleship unleashed its first salvo, the shells tearing through the pine trees and crashing into the Westerplatte's ammunition depot. The earth bucked and shuddered as if split open. Windows rattled violently in distant Danzig. Europe's war had begun, even before anyone could fully grasp its name. Inside Polish Guardhouse No. 1, Major Sicharski felt the concrete floor tremble beneath his feet. He raised a whistle to his lips and blew a single, sharp blast. Na stanowiska. To positions. Soldiers leaped up and scrambled to the narrow corridors, their heels scraping against the damp earth floor. A signalman urgently cranked the handle of a field telephone. A Browning WZ 30 machine gun crew swiftly fed a belt of ammunition into their weapon. One soldier quickly glanced at a small family photo he pulled from his breast pocket, then tucked it away without a second look. On the western frontier, the darkness was even more profound. A thick fog hung heavily over the wheat fields, and the village roads appeared as black ribbons winding through the landscape. German troops stood rigidly along the fences, their eyes fixed on their watches, the low rumble of Panzer engines audible behind them. Fall Weiss, the plan for the invasion of Poland, had reached the irreversible moment. On the ground, Blitzkrieg was more than just a word. It was a relentless rhythm. The screech of tank tracks, the crackle of radios, the thunder of artillery, and the terrifying shriek of Stukas diving like airborne hammers. A German battalion set up their MG-34 machine guns along the edge of a forest. These guns, firing 92 by 57mm rounds at a cyclic rate of approximately 800 to 900 rounds per minute, had an effective range of around 1,200 meters, with a maximum range of 3,500 to 4,700 meters when mounted on a tripod. Gunners tested their triggers, the receivers of the weapons quivering like animals eager to run. Poland was still in the throes of mobilization. Units were being transported by train, while cavalry columns moved along dirt lanes, their horses steaming in the cool air. They had no intention of charging tanks head-on, contrary to later myths. Instead, they used horses for rapid deployment, then dismounted to fight, according to some sources. On the highways, Polish 7TP tanks lumbered along, their turrets constantly scanning the horizon. Each tank was armed with a 37mm Bofors gun, capable of penetrating any German tank of 1939 at close ranges. However, there were far too few 7TPs to count the thousands of German machines poised to invade. A Polish commander watched his small column with grim determination, like a stone wall facing a surging flood. Polish WZ 36 Bofors 37mm anti-tank guns were hauled into position along the edges of fields. Their barrels, slim and deadly, were chambered for 37mm rounds and could fire at a rate of approximately 12 rounds per minute, with a muzzle velocity of 800 to 870 meters per second. Their effective range extended from a few hundred meters to around a kilometer, with a maximum range of 4,000 m. Crews hunkered down, concealed under grass netting, waiting for the telltale rumble of tank tracks. Above, Ju-87 Stukas formed into their attack formations. The standard early war load consisted of one 250 kilograms bomb mounted under the fuselage and four 50 kilograms bombs under the wings. The aircraft plunged earthward in a near vertical dive. The Jericho trumpet siren, mounted on the landing gear, howled with terrifying intensity, its sound piercing the very chests of the men below. Pilots selected their targets: rail yards, fuel depots, bridges. A button was pressed. Bombs were released. The Polish ground erupted in explosions even before the soldiers could hear the sound of the retreating engines. In Warsaw, morning music still played on the radio. Suddenly, a bulletin interrupted the broadcast. Germany attacks. All forces to defense positions. People poured into the streets, clutching bundles, children, and pulling carts. An old man drew back a curtain and stared at the sky, as if reading his fate in the heavens. Air raid sirens wailed, their sound stretching into the distance. The initial onslaught was not a single decisive battle, but rather the moment when all the pieces fell into place. Naval guns, tank tracks, the screaming sirens of Stuka dive bombers. Poland stood in the center, like a door kicked open by a simultaneous blow from both shoulder and hammer. 10:17 on September 3rd, 1939, outside Piotrkow Trybunalski. The sun beat down harshly, and the air was thick with dust kicked up from the roads and dry fields. Highways vibrated under the weight of German armor columns. On a low ridge, a Polish company dug firing pits, chest deep. They heard the Stukas long before they saw them. A Panzer II led the advance, its turret shaking as its 20mm cannon sprayed the landscape with fire. Behind it came early Panzer IIIs with 37mm guns, their frontal armor approximately 30mm thick, according to some sources. The German line fanned out across the fields. Polish cavalry had already retreated from the open ground, and now lay scattered in villages and woods, firing in shifting positions. A Polish 37mm Bofors gun flashed. The round slammed into the flank of a Panzer II at a range of roughly 400 to 500 m. The tank lurched to a halt, black smoke billowing from its damaged hull. Crewmen bailed out and scrambled for cover. The Polish gunner yelled, "Next!" The tube recoiled again. Another tank took a hit to its tracks and swerved sideways, effectively blocking the road. For a few minutes, the Poles felt as if they were holding the enemy at bay. Then, the sky unleashed chaos. Stuka's Dove. A 250 kilograms bomb detonated behind the guns, sending a geyser of soil erupting to treetop height. Telephone wires whipped violently like snakes. The anti-tank crew was thrown from their pit. The wail of the Jericho trumpet stretched fear taut within their ribs. MG-34s began their deadly saw-like buzz. Belts of 7. 92mm ammunition raked the field edge. Polish infantry flattened themselves against the dust, grit grinding in their teeth. 3 to 5 second bursts meant hundreds of bullets, delivered with relentless mechanical precision. One platoon attempted to retreat into a nearby brick village. They sprinted across a farmyard. A mother yanked her child into a potato cellar. Through a crack in the cellar wall, the boy watched a soldier fall beside a dog. The dog barked once, then fell silent. In the north, Westerplatte continued to burn. The Polish garrison, numbering approximately 180 to 200 men, held out against naval shells, field artillery, and repeated assaults, surrendering only after 7 days. Common tallies indicate about 15 were killed and around 50 wounded. In the shattered rubble, a Polish defender discovered his friend's pocket watch. The hands were frozen at 4:45. He pocketed it, as if making a vow. The days passed with a speed that defied any defensive timetable. German forces punched deep into Polish territory, cutting off Polish armies from each other. River lines were crossed by pontoons under heavy fire. Poles marched at night to avoid aircraft, hiding by day, but Stukas and reconnaissance planes felt ever present. Warsaw was bombed relentlessly. Smaller towns were hit as well. Columns of refugees poured down the roads, hauling quilts, cattle, and hand carts. German aircraft dove to strafe these civilians in a terror bombing pattern that has been widely documented. Dust and the cries of the wounded intertwined with the roar of engines. Still, Poland countered. From September 9th to 19th, the Battle of the Bzura erupted west of Warsaw, a massive Polish counterattack near Kutno and the Bzura River. Polish armies slammed into the German flank, retaking towns in the opening days. Cavalry and infantry worked along forest edges to cut supply roads. Germany was taken by surprise and redeployed panzer divisions and air power to seal the breach. At a farmhouse near Loix, General Kuderzyba stood on an earthen bank, his binoculars dusty. His order was succinct. Hit the right. Hold the river. Behind him, a young runner's hands trembled as he unfolded an unsent letter. Father, they say Germany is strong, but I'm coming home. He stuffed it back into his pocket and ran, tripped, rose, and ran again. The Bzura became a whirlpool of destruction. Germany countered with encirclement, concentrated fire, and Stukas, pinning down pocket after pocket of resistance. The result was catastrophic for Poland. Estimates run from 18 to 20,000 Polish dead, 32,000 wounded, and around 170,000 captured. Germany lost approximately 8,000 dead, several thousand captured, and roughly 50 tanks. These numbers carved a deep wound into what remained of Poland's field army. Yet, the battle also proved that Poland would not collapse from a single blow. The second crest of the invasion ended amidst utter saturation. Burning cities, riverbanks strewn with wreckage, and radios filled with static. Poland fought within a closing vice, unaware that a second jaw was about to bite from the east. 3:20 on September 17th, 1939, a village near Poland's eastern Kresy border. Early autumn cold, a thin fog drifting over potato fields. Roosters were still asleep. A Polish sentry heard unfamiliar tracks approaching from the forest. He squinted. Not German. A different, seemingly endless column. The Soviet Red Army was entering Poland from the east. The news hit Warsaw like a punch to the back. The Polish government had already evacuated the capital. Northeastern units were trapped between two invading forces. There was no safe withdrawal. Battalions dissolved into the woods or desperately forced their way toward Romania and Hungary. Warsaw was sealed off. German artillery ringed the city and fired into bridges, depots, and neighborhoods. Polish air defense answered with 40mm Bofors guns and machine guns, but ammunition grew scarce. Civilians dug shelters in courtyards. A doctor scribbled casualty counts. 30 abdominal wounds, 40 burns, morphine exhausted. He tucked the paper into his coat, as if refusing to let the world forget. On September 27th to 28th, Warsaw capitulated. Gunfire dwindled into sporadic cracks. The city was shattered. Civilian deaths in the 1939 campaign are often estimated at around 200,000 across Poland, resulting from bombing and ground operations. The Polish army suffered approximately 70,000 killed and 130,000 wounded, with hundreds of thousands captured by Germany and the USSR. Collapse was not a single loud fall. It was lights going out one by one. An anti-tank platoon outside Lublin ran out of shells. They removed the breech blocks from their guns and dropped them into a well. Their lieutenant said, "Scatter. Keep personal weapons. We meet somewhere." It was a last order, never officially recorded. Yet, another legacy was being born at the same time. On a hospital train, a Polish major wrote, "We lose because we are struck from two sides, because there is no space left for a small country between giants." He folded the diary and handed it to a nurse for safekeeping. She slipped it beside her own family photo. Europe's map changed in a matter of weeks. Poland was partitioned between Germany and the Soviet Union under prior agreements, according to some sources. Borders vanished from Berlin and Moscow's official maps. However, they did not vanish from Polish memory. They became underground lines of resistance. In military doctrine, Poland 1939 was the first full-scale demonstration of mechanized air power Blitzkrieg. Punch through a weak point, drive deep, encircle rapidly, sever command and logistics. Western Europe watched and learned, but too late. Many still thought in the rhythms of 1918, while 1939 already ran on engines and radio networks. In technology, the Polish skies provided Stukas with proof of their psychological terror and dive accuracy. The MG-34 proved a general-purpose machine gun concept at a campaign scale. Polish 37mm Bofors guns demonstrated that light anti-tank weapons could be effective if there were enough of them and sufficient support. In memory, Westerplatte became a symbol of a week of defiance against a fleet and an army. The Bzura became a symbol of counterattack in the face of despair. And September 1st became a date etched into every Polish family as a line of fracture. The 445 shot open not only a campaign, it opened a new world order. With Poland invaded, Britain and France declared war on Germany. The conflict spread, escalating into a global war. The harshest legacy was the cost that followed. 6 years of occupation, genocide, camps, and the systematic crushing of Poland's leadership class, according to broad historical syntheses. Yet, from the ashes, Poles preserved what could not be taken, the ideal of a free state. It survived in the government in exile, in the home army, in songs whispered in basements. Poland 1939 is Europe's opening gun not because it was the loudest bang, but because it forced the continent to awaken in fire. When the blast faded, Europe was irrevocably changed, and the shadow of Westerplatte still stands in the salty wind, a reminder that the largest wars can begin on a narrow strip of sand, guarded by a few hundred men who refuse to yield.